If you would open to the book of Daniel, chapter 10. We have been going through the book of Daniel for several weeks and several months, and we have made it to Daniel chapter 10, and we are going to be in virtually the entire chapter this morning. We're going to look at verses 1 to 20. Daniel 10, 1 to 20. The title of the sermon this morning is Fear Not, You Are Treasured by God. Normally I read the text up front, but due to the length of the text, I'll read it as I go through the exposition of the text. So let me open us in a word of prayer, and we'll jump into the text and the exposition of it, and then I'll give application. So if you will, pray with me. Father in heaven, what a great joy it is to see, to look out and to see people from many nations, Lord, to see us gather together in one room to worship you. It is such a reminder of what heaven will be like, that we will gather with brothers and sisters from all over the world and lift our hands and bow our faces and worship the King who sits on the throne, together as one people, as one bride. I pray, Lord, that you would give us this glimpse of that this morning as we read your word. I pray, God, that you would help us to not simply know, but to feel how treasured we are by you. And therefore, we have no reason to fear. I pray this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. All right. This morning, we're going to start off with exposition of the text, and I'll go through it verse by verse or section by section, if you'll follow along in your copy of God's Word. So let's start off looking at Daniel 10, verse 1. In the third year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a word was revealed to Daniel, who was named Belteshazzar. And the word was true, and it was a great conflict. And he understood the word and had understanding of the vision. So as we've been going through the book of Daniel, Daniel is in Babylon, and Babylon eventually gets defeated by Persia. And now Persia has taken over Babylon, and now Cyrus is king of Persia. We finally come across the name Cyrus. We had been looking at the name Darius the Mede. And as I mentioned before, there's a strong argument that Darius the Mede is the same person as Cyrus the Great, though that's debatable. Cyrus rose to power in 539 BC, and so now it's the third year of Cyrus, which means it's around 537 BC. Now we know that Cyrus, he had already previously sent a group of exiles back to Israel. Remember, the Lord had moved his heart to send them home. So a group of them went back to Israel. But many stayed in Babylon, and so did Daniel. And the narrator says that while Daniel is there in Persia, a word is revealed to him. That word is repeated 3 times just in verse 1. The narrator gives this word 2 descriptions. A, he says the word is true, and B, that it was a great conflict, or it was about a great conflict. Now, this could refer to a war between 2 earthly armies or a war between 2 spiritual, heavenly armies. Either one. But either way, Daniel has understanding about the word and understanding about the vision that that's going to be revealed to him. Let's look at verse 2 to 3. In those days, I, Daniel, was mourning for 3 weeks. I ate no delicacies, no meat or wine entered my mouth, nor did I anoint myself at all for the full 3 weeks. So this word, this vision that's revealed to Daniel, apparently it was heavy, because Daniel enters into this period of mourning for 3 weeks. Mourning here means to lament or to grieve. He takes 2 actions in his mourning. A, his diet changed. He ate no delicacies, literally treasured bread. He ate no treasured bread. He ate no meat, and he drank no wine. And B, he did not anoint himself. What does that mean? It was common in the ancient Near East to take olive oil and to anoint your body with olive oil as a sign of rejoicing and or to soothe one's skin from the intense heat in the ancient Near East. But for 21 days, Daniel has no choice food, no meat, no wine, no oils. Look at verse 4-6. On the 24th day of the first month, as I was standing on the bank of the great river, that is the Tigris, I lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, a man clothed in linen, with a belt of fine gold from Uphaz around his waist. His body was like beryl, his face like the appearance of lightning, his eyes like flaming torches, his arms and legs like the gleam of burnished bronze, and the sound of his words like the sound of a multitude. So one day Daniel is standing on the bank of the Tigris River, and he lifts up his eyes and he sees this figure. He gives 8 descriptions of this figure. Number 1, he's described as a man. Now, whether it actually is a man is debatable, but he's described as a man. 2, he's clothed in linen. 3, he's wearing a belt of fine gold. 4, his body is like beryl. That's like could also be translated yellow jasper or chrysolite or topaz. 5, his face is like lightning. 6, his eyes are like flaming torches. 7, his arms and legs are like burnished or polished bronze. And 8, when he speaks like a multitude. Now, this is quite descriptive. We all want to know, who is this? Who is this person that he sees? The 2 most common theories are these. Either A, it's an angel, it's an unnamed angel, or B, this is a theophany of the pre-incarnate Christ. Revelation 1:12-16 has several parallels to this passage. I don't see a good way to choose between those 2, but I'm inclined to believe, personally, that this is a theophany of the pre-incarnate Christ. That this person who's described is Jesus before he took on flesh, the second person of the Trinity. But that's debatable. Let's look at verse 7-9. And I, Daniel, alone saw the vision, for the men who were with me did not see the vision, but a great trembling fell upon them, and they fled to hide themselves. So I was left alone and saw this great vision, and no strength was left in me. My radiant appearance was fearfully changed, and I retained no strength. Then I heard the sound of his words, and as I heard the sound of his words, I fell on my face in deep sleep with my face to the ground. So Daniel has these other men that are with him. However, they don't see the vision. They don't see what Daniel sees. Even though they didn't see it, though, a great trembling falls upon them. Apparently, they felt the supernatural presence. There was something supernatural about what's going on here. So supernatural that they flee. They run away to go hide themselves. And now Daniel's all alone. And he sees the vision. And he has 3 reactions to the vision. Number 1, his strength is all dried up. He says, no strength was left in me. I've retained no strength. This is a heavy vision indeed. Number 2, he says, my radiant appearance was fearfully changed. In the Hebrew, it literally reads, my splendor was changed to ruin. And 3, he falls into a deep sleep. This is a similar experience to John has. John in Revelation 1:17, it says, when I saw him, I fell at his feet as though dead. This is how John responds to seeing Jesus. Look at verse 10-11. And behold, a hand touched me, set me trembling on my hands and knees. And he said to me, O Daniel, man greatly loved, understand the words that I speak to you and stand upright, for now I have been sent to you. And when he had spoken this word to me, I stood up trembling. So all of a sudden, as Daniel is lying prostrate on his face, he's got his face into the ground, completely prostrate, all of a sudden a hand touches him. Now, one theory, as I mentioned, is that the figure in verses 5-6 is the pre-incarnate Christ, but the figure in verses 10-21 is an angel. It seems to me that in this part of the section that Daniel is not interacting with the pre-incarnate Christ, that he's actually interacting with an angel. I think there's more than one figure here. That's just my theory, but this is debatable among scholars. This angel, so I'm going to assume it's an angel for the duration of the sermon, in 10-21. The angel's hand touches Daniel, and it sets Daniel up on his hands and his knees. But it sets him up trembling. And the angel speaks to Daniel. And the angel says this to him. He says, "Oh, Daniel, man greatly loved." Or as the CSB translates, "Daniel, you are a man treasured by God." These are the same words that Gabriel spoke to Daniel in chapter 9. And then is spoken again here in chapter 10. The angel gives Daniel two commands. Number one, he says, understand the words that I speak to you. The word for understand there in the Hebrew is in the Hiphil stem, which I know means nothing. What that means is that it denotes causation. In other words, the angel is going to cause Daniel to understand this vision. Number two, he says, stand upright. Now, Daniel does not feel like he has the strength to stand upright. He is prostrate and he's on his hands and his knees because he has no strength. He feels like he does not have any strength. But the angel commands him, stand up. As Joyce Baldwin writes, God's commands are his enablings. That's a good quote. God's commands are his enablings. And the angel says that he has been sent to Daniel, which means there's a sender. This is one of the reasons why I'm not sure that this is the Christ here. Because the angel, he says, I was sent, which means there's a sender, which seems to imply that maybe the figure in 5 to 6 sent this angel to Daniel to touch him and give him strength. He stands up, but notice how he stands up. He stands up trembling. What does that mean? It means involuntary bodily reaction of shuddering or tremoring. Look at verse 12. Then he said to me, fear not, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your heart to understand and humbled yourself before your God, your words have been heard, and I have come because of your words. The angel speaks a phrase that occurs all throughout Scripture. They are the same words spoken to Abraham, Hagar, Jacob, Joshua, Gideon, Ahaz, and dozens of times to the nation of Israel. Fear not. He says, for from the first day. What is the first day he's referring to? I think he's referring to chapter 9, verse 3. We looked at that a few weeks ago. When Daniel begins his prayer of his confession, he says, from the first day that you began praying, which was 21 days ago, that you set your heart to understand. In other words, Daniel sought to understand this vision as best as he could. Vision agnosticism was not an option for Daniel. And he says, from the first day that you humbled yourself before your God, Daniel had fasted. He had put on sackcloth. He had sat in ashes while he spent verse after verse confessing his sin and the sin of his people. The angel says, from that first day, your words have been heard. In other words, Daniel's pleas for mercy did not fall on deaf ears. He says, I have come to you because of your words. That implies that if Daniel had not prayed, the angel would not have come. Look at verse 13 to 14. The prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days. But Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, for I was left there with the kings of Persia, and came to make you understand what is to happen to your people in the latter days. For the vision is for days yet to come. Now, this is where we get into some tricky text here. The angel confirms that God heard Daniel's prayer. We've been looking at chapter 9, this confession, this long prayer that Daniel's been making. The angel says, God has heard your prayer. He heard it from the very first day. But the angel took 21 days to come to Daniel. And the question is, why? Why did he delay? Why did he delay 3 weeks? Because there appears to be a heavenly war going on. He says, the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days, 3 weeks. What does that mean? I think it means that the prince of the kingdom of Persia seems to be referring to a spiritual force on the opposing side. The prince of the kingdom of Persia seems to me to be either a demon or Satan himself. I don't think he's referring to literally the prince of the kingdom of Persia. I think he's referring to a spiritual force. You'll see that in a minute. And he says, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me. So there's this angel that's fighting against the prince of the kingdom of Persia. There's a heavenly war going on. They're fighting for 21 days. And all of a sudden, Michael comes to help. And you're like, who is Michael? Where did he come from? Michael is one of two angels that are named in the Bible. There are only two angels named, Gabriel and Michael. His name occurs 4 times in Scripture. It occurs in Daniel 10, Daniel 12, Jude 9, and Revelation 12:7. In Jude 9, he's called an archangel, which means a first or chief angel. And now, through the help of Michael, this angel is able to come to Daniel. So in other words, picture the scene here. In the heavens, there is this army going on between this unnamed angel and the prince of Persia, perhaps a demon, could be Satan himself. They're warring for 21 days, and he's trying to get to Daniel to give him this vision. And Michael comes to help him win that battle so that he can then go to Daniel and give him the vision. And that's what happens. The angel comes to him and he affirms that the vision is for days yet to come. Look at verse 15 to 17. When he had spoken to me according to these words, I turned my face toward the ground and was mute. And behold, one in the likeness of the children of man touched my lips. Then I opened my mouth and spoke. I said to him who stood before me, O my Lord, by reason of the vision pains that have come upon me, I retain no strength. How can my Lord's servant talk with my Lord? For now no strength remains in me and no breath is left in me. So while the angel is speaking to Daniel, Daniel turns his face back to the ground and he's mute. And then for the second time, someone touches Daniel. Whether it's the same angel or another angel, someone touches Daniel. He says, one in the likeness of the children of man. So this person who touches him looks like a human, looks like a man. He touches his lips. Why does he touch his lips? He touches his lips to give him the ability to speak. Daniel felt mute. He couldn't speak. The angel gives him the ability to speak, and Daniel calls him my Lord. Now, not Lord like Yahweh Lord, but like Lord like Sir. He says, my Lord. He says, because of the vision pains. That word there for pains, vision pains, is literally birth pangs. He says, I retain no strength. No strength remains in me, not even to talk. Look at verse 18 to 19. Again, one having the appearance of a man touched me and strengthened me. And he said, O man greatly loved, fear not, peace be with you, be strong and of good courage. And as he spoke to me, I was strengthened and said, let my Lord speak, for you have strengthened me. This is now the third time that an angel has touched Daniel. Verse 10, verse 16, and verse 18. The first time that the angel touched him was to make him stand up. The second time was to make him speak. And the third time was to strengthen him. And the angel repeats the words that he had spoken earlier. He says, O man, greatly loved, you who are treasured by God. And Daniel's given 3 exhortations by the angel. He says, number 1, fear not, same as before. Number 2, peace be with you. He is assuring Daniel, you are safe. And 3, be strong and of good courage. That's the same command given to Joshua, Solomon, Ezra, Zerubbabel, the nation of Israel. Over and over again, they are told, be strong and of good courage. And notice what happens as the angel speaks to him. Did you catch it? The angel simply talks to him. And as the angel talks to him, what happens? As he spoke to me, I was strengthened. How was Daniel strengthened? By words. And Daniel says, let my Lord speak, for you have strengthened me. Daniel is now ready to receive the full contents of the vision. Look at verse 20. Then he said, do you know why I've come to you? But now I will return to fight against the prince of Persia. And when I go out, behold, the prince of Greece will come. This angel now leaves Daniel to return to fight, to continue fighting this battle in the heavens, to fight against the prince of Persia. After that, he will fight against the prince of Greece, perhaps another spiritual force. But this heavenly messenger will not fight alone. He's assisted by Michael, your prince. We see that in verse 21, which we won't look at this morning because verse 21 really goes with chapter 11, which we'll get to next week. And so next week, we will look at the contents of this vision when we look at verse 21 and chapter 11. And we'll stop there with our exposition of the text. Now, what do we do with all this? How does this apply to our life? I have 7 truths. 7 truths for us this morning. Number 1, it's a question. Do I make space to lament in my Christian walk? Do I make space to lament in my Christian walk? We see in the text this morning that Daniel was mourning for 3 weeks. That word for mourning can also be translated lament. His lamenting is characterized by no choice food, no meat, no wine, no oil on his body. And as I read this, because I like meat. I could go without the wine, but no choice food, no ice cream, no dessert. As I read this description for 21 days, I asked myself this question. Do I make space to lament in my Christian walk? To lament over my sin. To lament over my brother and sister's sin. To lament over the lostness of my friends and my family. To lament over the lostness of the nations. To lament over God's name being profaned every day. Do I make space to lament in the Christian life? You see, the book of Lamentations was given to us to express mourning. It was a book written about how they lamented over the fall of Jerusalem. Many of the Psalms are Psalms of lament. And these laments, they're not written simply to be descriptive of our lamenting. They are also meant to be prescriptive. In other words, they are blueprints for how we should express our grief. It's commonly known that we have trouble expressing grief, right? Sometimes we're going through a season of grieving, and what do? We just work a lot. Sometimes we're expressing grieving, and we just go travel, or we watch entertainment. We escape. And yet the Bible gives us a blueprint for how, when we are going through a season of grief and we are grieving, how should we express that grief? Do I make space for this in my life? Do I make space to express my mourning and my loss about whatever that I am mourning over and I am feeling grieved over? Every Christian should make space to lament. Number 2, the Christian life should feel heavy and draining. The Christian life should feel heavy and draining. Now, let me say up front, the Christian life should also feel peaceful, restful, and joyful. Those are all wonderfully true. Jesus says, "My peace I give to you. Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Jesus says that my joy I will give to you. The Christian life should also feel peaceful, restful, and joyful. But the point being made in our text this morning is this: the Christian life should feel heavy and draining. Daniel was given a vision. Listen to what the vision does to Daniel. Verse 8. He says, "So I was left alone, and I saw this great vision. No strength was left in me. My radiant appearance was fearfully changed, and I retained no strength." The Christian life is a battle. It is a war fought in the trenches. And there will be seasons where you have no strength left, where your radiant appearance is changed, fearfully changed. Daniel's strength was so sapped that he says in verse 15, I turned my face toward the ground and I was mute. Sometimes the Christian life will be so heavy, you don't even have the words to express the burden you feel. You ever been there? The Christian life has ever felt so heavy that you didn't even have the words? God will give you trials that will steal the words out of your mouth. And you lie on the ground mute. Daniel says in verse 16, "O my Lord, by reason of the vision pains have come upon me. I retain no strength." That word there for pain is literally birth pangs, like a woman in labor. It reminds me of what Paul wrote in Galatians 4:19. "My little children, for whom I am again in the anguish of childbirth until Christ is formed in you." Just as a woman labors for hours and hours to experience the birth of another human being, we too labor for hours and weeks and months and years, maybe even decades, to experience the spiritual birth of another. Daniel says in verse 17, "How can my Lord's servant talk to my Lord? For now no strength remains in me. No breath is left in me." Even Jesus in his humanity felt drained. It says that Jesus needed to withdraw to desolate places to pray. Remember, what was Jesus doing during a violent storm on a ship? He was sleeping, no doubt, exhausted from ministry. Paul says that in the Christian life, we are afflicted, perplexed, persecuted, struck down, always carrying in the body the death of Jesus. Brothers and sisters, the Christian life should feel peaceful, restful, joyful. And the Christian life should feel heavy and draining. It's just both. If you only have one of those, something's off. If the Christian life only ever feels light, peaceful, joyful, that's all it ever feels, something's off. And if the Christian life only ever feels heavy, burdensome, draining, something's off. It's both. 3. We stand trembling. We stand trembling. This angel or angels that appeared to Daniel, they were no doubt terrifying. They were so terrifying that the men who were with Daniel, they fled to hide themselves. In other words, think about it. They had an opportunity to see glory, and all they want to do is hide. Daniel stays in the angel's presence, but he falls prostrate on his face. Suddenly a hand touches him, and the physical touch of this angel gives Daniel enough strength to set him trembling on his hands and his knees. But the angel commands him, stand upright. So Daniel stands, but he stands trembling. I like this phrase, I stood up trembling. It reminds me of the paradoxical tension of our relationship with God. It reminds me of what Paul wrote in Philippians 2, work out your salvation with fear and trembling. Now, normally, when you think of standing, you think of it as a posture of assertiveness, confidence, being sure. And yet Daniel stands trembling. You ever considered that the same book, Hebrews, that contains the statement, let us approach the throne of God with boldness? Think about that. When we go to God in prayer, we approach his throne with confidence, with boldness. The same book that says that is the same book that says it is a terrifying thing to fall into the hands of the living God. We stand in the presence of God because of Jesus Christ, but we stand trembling. we come into his presence trembling. 4, fear not. You are treasured by God. Fear not. You are treasured by God. Daniel stands there trembling, and the angel says the same thing to him twice. The first is, fear not. He says it in verse 12, fear not, Daniel. Verse 19, fear not. And the second is, you are treasured by God. In verse 11, he says, oh, Daniel, man greatly loved, or could be translated treasured by God. Verse 19, oh, man greatly loved, or treasured by God. What I want us to see is that the foundation of the command, fear not, is the statement, you are treasured by God. This command that God gives of fear not, the foundation of that command is you are treasured by God. Jesus gives the exact same exhortation, just with different wording. Jesus says, do not fear those who kill the body. Are not 5 sparrows sold for 2 pennies, and not one of them is forgotten before God? Fear not, you are of more value than many sparrows. Later, Jesus says, do not be anxious or fearful about your life, what you will eat, nor about your body, what you will put on. Consider the ravens. They neither sow nor reap. They have neither storehouse nor barn, and yet God feeds every one of them. Of how much more value are you than the birds? What is the greatest exhortation that you can give to someone who is walking in fear or walking in worry or anxiety? Or maybe that's you this morning. Maybe you're anxious. Maybe you're fearful. Maybe you're worried. What is the greatest exhortation you can give to someone? It is this. Fear not. You are treasured by God. Five, God is moved by humble determination and a determination to be humble. God is moved by humble determination and a determination to be humble. The angel says in verse 12, for from the first day that you set your heart to understand and humbled yourself before your God, your words have been heard, and I have come because of your words. In other words, the angel says, I was going to come at the beginning of chapter 9, but I was detained by this heavenly battle that's going on. But God heard the words of Daniel, and he's moved to respond. Now, why? Now, certainly it's because of his great mercy. We looked at that last week. God is moved because of his great mercy, but it's also because of Daniel's humble determination and determination to be humble. Daniel had humble determination. The angel says, you set your heart to understand. Daniel said in chapter 8:15, when I, Daniel, had seen the vision, I sought to understand it. God is moved by his people's humble determination to understand his word. Now, this is important because so many Christians, when they come across a difficult theology or a difficult philosophy, they're just simply not interested in learning how to understand it. They're not interested. It's too much work. God is moved when he sees that his people have a humble determination that says, you know what? I don't understand this. Maybe even this morning right now, you're like, look brother, I got no idea what you're saying. God is moved when his people say, I don't understand, but I am going to seek to understand. I'm going to do whatever it takes within my power and through God's grace to understand what is this talking about. God is moved by that. Not only did Daniel have a humble determination, he also had a determination to be humble. We saw in chapter 9 that Daniel is seeking God by prayers of pleas for mercy with fasting and sackcloth and ashes. He's making corporate confession of his sin. In chapter 10, he's fasting from choice foods and wine and meat and oil. And God sees this act of humility. He sees Daniel humbling himself. He's determined to be humble. Now, why is this important? Because so often we're stuck in the Christian life. We get to this fork in the road, right? And we're like, should we date or should we not? Should we change jobs or should we not? Should we change churches or should we not? Should we try to have kids or should we not? And you're at this fork in the road where you're stuck, you're praying, you're seeking God, and yet there's no answer, right? You don't know which way to go. We're asking God for clarity, and yet there's no clarity. What do you do? What do you do in that moment? God is moved by humble determination to understand and a determination to be humble in that understanding. Set your heart to understand, God, which way do you want me to take? And in that process, humble yourself. You need an answer from God, humble yourself. You need to fast from meat, fast from meat. Until God speaks and say, like Jacob, I will not let go. And you say, God, I will not let go until I hear your voice speak, God. God is moved by that. 6, there is always a real war going on behind the scenes. There is always, even right now, there's a real war going on behind the scenes. There's always a real war going on behind the scenes. This chapter in Daniel is one of the most enlightening chapters in the Bible about what goes on behind the scenes. We have just a few passages that kind of peel back the curtain and give us a glimpse into right? Like what we see now is just the physical realm, but there is a spiritual realm that's going on that we can't see. And we're given a few passages in Scripture that pull back that curtain and allow us to see into that spiritual reality. We see it in Job 1 and 2. In Job 1 and 2, we see God and Satan interacting, talking about Job. We see it in 1 Kings 22, where Micaiah gives us a vision of these spirits that come before God, and they're used to judge Ahab. We see it in Zechariah 3, where Satan is accusing Joshua, the high priest, before God. We see it in 1 Chronicles 21, where Satan is inciting David to take a census. And in our passage this morning, we see this battle going on between angels. I don't think this is a metaphor. I think this is literally happening. That this angel and the prince of the demonic force or Satan or whoever it is, they're battling in heaven. And even Michael, the archangel, comes to help him. Even after the vision, the angel says that he's returning to fight against the prince of Persia. What I find fascinating is that it took 3 weeks for the angel to deliver the message. They battled for 3 weeks, having this heavenly battle. This gives us a glimpse into the reality that there is always a real war going on behind the scenes, whether we sense it or not. I don't want to chalk everything up to spiritual warfare, but we certainly shouldn't chalk nothing up to spiritual warfare. This means 2 things. Number 1, it means we are never fighting alone. In our battles, we are never fighting alone. There are angels and seraphim and spiritual forces that are fighting for us behind the scenes. You need help in your marriage? You have help. There are angels fighting the battles in your marriage. You are not fighting those battles alone. You need help in your school and pressure and the drive to perform and the fear of what if I don't perform. You're not fighting that battle alone. You have spiritual forces fighting for you. We are never fighting alone. And number two, we must never be alone in our fighting. We must never be alone in our fighting. God has given us weapons. What were the weapons Daniel used? Prayer, His Word, His people, His Spirit, His communion with Him. We must never be alone in our fighting. We must use the weapons that God has given us as Daniel uses them. And number 7, we don't need supernatural strength. We simply need to be strengthened supernaturally. We don't need supernatural strength. We simply need to be strengthened supernaturally. I think sometimes when I pray for strength, you ever pray for strength and whatever? I want to be the spiritual version of Samson. Like I want to be able to kill lions and rip off city gates and kill Philistines with a jawbone and break apart ropes. Like I want supernatural strength. Why? Maybe because that's what I think I need. Maybe I think I need supernatural strength to defeat this sin or to make this choice or to not respond this way. But we don't need supernatural strength. We simply need to be strengthened supernaturally. You say, how do we strengthen supernaturally? Same way Daniel was. How was Daniel strengthened? Words. How does God strengthen us supernaturally? Through His words. In verse 9, Daniel is lying prostrate on the ground with no strength left. And how does the angel strengthen him? Through his words. He says, understand the words that I speak to you and stand upright. It is simply a word that gives Daniel the strength to stand up. Again, in verse 17, Daniel says, how can I talk? I have no strength. And the angel speaks to him and says, Daniel, as he spoke to me, I was strengthened. We don't need supernatural strength. We simply need to be strengthened supernaturally. So often we're looking for God to give us this supernatural strength to do this. And what God says is that come and be strengthened by my word. Now that may happen through a sermon. That may happen reading an article. That may happen through a brother or sister's exhortation. That may happen in your own quiet time in reading this book. But make no mistake, this is our gym. This is our weight room. You need strength. You need strength to parent with grace and patience. You need strength to show forgiveness to your spouse. You need strength to deal with your boss. You need strength to deal with your teachers. You need strength. Here's your weight room. Here's your gym. This is how God does it. This is how God imparts strength through His words. He speaks and we are strengthened. I pray that as you come to the Lord, you will realize 2 things. Number 1, you are treasured by Him. More than you know. And number 2, He will give you strength through His word.